Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm Abigail, and welcome to this week's Zion Tabernacle of Greater Austin, Texas Shabbat meeting. To begin, our brother Richard is going to start the meeting with a prayer.
Holy Father, you're glorious in power, you're great and faithful in your love and your kindness and your mercies. We just thank you for this day that you've given us, and we can honor you and thank you. Father, we are here also to enjoy the Sabbath with a message, and we need your purposes, Lord, your power to go forth to gather your people and to give them ears to hear and hearts to understand. So we just praise you, Father, for all your goodness up front and all the way that you look over this meeting and your people in Yeshua's name. Amen.
And now for a timely presentation with Eliyahu ben David.
Welcome. Our theme, the vulnerable world technocalypse. We're asking the question, is the world doomed by technology? No, this is not an advertisement for an old Schwarzenegger film. It's actually a very serious subject. As a matter of fact, this topic is being discussed and sliced and diced by some of the leading minds in the world. And in fact, that's going to be our starting point tonight. The University of Oxford, when you talk about educational institutions, you can't get any more serious than the University of Oxford. It goes back as far as 1096 and sometime before that. It is the oldest university in the English-speaking world and maybe the entire world. It is quite huge, as you can see. It has a huge budget. Last year, it had a total income of £2.45 billion sterling and took in 624.8 million pounds sterling in research grants and contracts. So many of the world's elite businesses, governments, turn to the University of Oxford for enlightenment. Oxford has a wide range of notable alumni, including 23 prime ministers of the United Kingdom and many heads of state and governments around the world, 72 Nobel Prize laureates, and we could go on and on. You couldn't find, I don't believe, a place that is more prestigious in the academic world or better connected with the luminaries of the world system. This is Professor Nick Bostrom. He's a professor at Oxford University, and he's the director of something called Oxford Future of Humanity Institute. And he and his institute concern themselves with questions of world importance and actually existential questions about the world. And as you can see here in Wired magazine, it's highlighting Nick Bostrom and what he and his institute are doing with the theme, technology that could end humanity. and how to stop it. Technology ending humanity is, in fact, what a technocalypse, there we go, what a technocalypse is. It's hard to say. Let's hope it's hard to happen. But Nick Bostrom doesn't think so. And he's thinking, and a lot of other pretty high-powered people are thinking that we need to do something about this threat. Here's a paper that Nick Bostrom wrote as part of the work of his institute. It's called The Vulnerable World Hypothesis. This is what we're going to look at and discuss tonight, the Vulnerable World Hypothesis. And it's a fairly lengthy paper, but he has an illustration that he uses that kind of gets to the heart of what this is all about. It's this illustration of an urn. And not too long ago, a radio personality described this very well. So I have a video of that for you I'm going to share with you.
Are you familiar with the philosopher Nick Bostrom?
Yeah.
So Nick is a very unusual and very smart guy who focuses on questions of existential risk. And he recently wrote a paper, or at least I recently read this paper. I don't know when he wrote it, but I think it's recent, titled The Vulnerable World Hypothesis. And what he imagines is, what he asks you to imagine is that we have an urn in front of us. He calls it the urn of invention. And the urn is filled with colored balls. And we have been reaching into this urn rather compulsively, these millennia, pulling out either white or gray balls. And the white balls are inventions, pieces of technology, memes, cultural norms, institutions that have no real downside, right? These just make our lives better. And the gray balls are inventions, and they're like that have benefits and costs, right? So, being able to split the atom is one, right? You can produce energy, but it can produce bombs and, waste when you produce energy. And so there are goods and harms that come from these inventions. What he asks us to consider is that there's a black ball, or perhaps many black balls, in the urn of invention, and we just haven't pulled one out yet. And a black ball is a technology which is synonymous with the end of civilization, right? And he goes into great detail about what sort of thing this might be and what we would need to do to stabilize civilization in the face of this possibility. And so, the first thing you're asked to acknowledge is that it seems rather plausible that there is a black ball or two in the urn of invention, right? There are things we could discover that we can't undiscover that could spell our doom because it becomes so easy for one deranged person to destroy the lives of millions or billions. So, one example is that he calls it the easy nukes case. Just imagine if it were just a fact of nature that splitting the atom is much easier than it in fact is, and it turns out it only took taking two pieces of glass and a magnet and running some electric current through it, and then you've got an atom bomb, right? Now, if it were that easy to make an atom bomb, 1 in a million people would make one, more or less every day of the week, and we would just see cities going up in mushroom clouds, right? It would be the end of civilization if it were that easy to make an atom bomb. So we're just lucky that it's hard enough to refine the fuel, and to build bombs, certainly large bombs. If climate change were going to be much worse than it seems likely to be, if we were talking about a 20-degree centigrade rise in temperature over the course of the next 50 years, unless we got our act together, it just may in fact be the case that we can't get our act together in the face of that risk, and we're done for, right? So we're relying on luck in many, many places. But the punchline of this essay is that the only scenario whereby we can actually deal with this risk and respond to it should it come to pass? I mean, should we have the time to realize that we have pulled a black ball from the urn is to have what he calls a state of turnkey totalitarianism and hyper-technological surveillance, obviously enabled by some AI that we have not yet built, but he's imagining us surveilling one another at all times in as reasonable way as possible, with the data anonymized in all the ways we would want it anonymized, but basically to deliver a system where we could intrude on your behavior very, very quickly, Minority Report style, where there's an AI at every moment of the day watching what you're doing with your hands, right? In a world that has pulled the black ball. If it is trivially easy for anyone in this room to weaponize the flu of 1918 because all the data is out and you've got something on your desktop that can do it, right? And we can't uninvent this thing, then we need to know what you're doing with your hands. So the net result of this essay to suddenly make me open-minded to something which, if described in the absence of having considered the urn of invention and some of these examples, sounds like just the most dystopian horror show imaginable. I mean, a perfect surveillance and an ability to turn on totalitarianism at a moment's notice. How could that be at all desirable? It becomes at least potentially desirable if you grant that it may in fact be the only stable state for civilization in light of what we're currently doing. And what we're currently doing is just reaching into the urn and pulling things out as fast as we can without giving any thought really to what's going on.
Pretty scary, don't you think? On more than one level. When I came across this and realized where it was from, I was stunned, to tell you the truth. It took Western civilization over 1,000 years to break free from the Dark Ages, to break free from totalitarianism. As a matter of fact, Oxford was still a university back then, during the Dark Ages. And it had a role in bringing us out of the Dark Ages. And so it is absolutely stunning to me that a suggestion could come out of Oxford University actually advocating for global totalitarianism on a level the world has never seen. Global totalitarianism where literally every single action you do is observed and can be instantly stopped. When I put a few other things into this mix, say for instance, Elon Musk's company and invention, whereby people can have their brains directly connected to the internet. You're being watched all the time. You do something whoever's on the other end of that wire doesn't like. Boom. The lights go out. Is that really a solution? Well, we're going to talk about that a little bit more a little later, but we want to take this thing in order. So let's talk about this entire proposal, to be fair about it. So we have the white balls, first of all, in this illustration. And these are being drawn out of the urn. These, of course, are discoveries, inventions that are supposed to be totally beneficial. And myself, I question whether there are any inventions that are totally beneficial. Certainly, many things have been designed to be totally beneficial. But I've seen mankind be so creative in the way that they can use things to cause harm and destruction. I don't think really there's anything that can be invented by man that cannot also be harmful. So I think the white balls are more of a hypothetical idea than a reality in our world. So really, I think most of the balls are gray. And these are discoveries and inventions that are both harmful and beneficial. So some things directly are that way, and you can tell that right away. Like, for instance, knives. Knives are very useful. We cut up vegetables, do all kinds of good work with knives. When I was a kid, I used to carry a penknife in my pocket, and used to whittle sticks with it. But people also do bad things with knives, don't they? So it's kind of in the gray area. Gunpowder, the same thing. You know, for a long time, and even today, people have used and do use gunpowder as a means of securing food for their family. Not a bad thing, but I don't have to tell you how otherwise gunpowder can be used that's not so good. Money. Money can be a good thing if it's used wisely, but the love of money is the root of all evil. Computers. I spend a good part of my day in front of a computer, and I hate it every minute. I don't hate what I'm doing, but I hate the computer. I feel like I'm fighting with it all the time, and I feel like I don't really own it. Do you know what I mean? My computer seems to be always wanting to tell me what to do instead of doing what I want it to do. So I kind of see my computer as in this gray area. I need to use it for beneficial purposes, but trust me, I'm not in love with it. Then we have the black balls. We hope there's not too many in there because they're catastrophic. As soon as they get pulled out of the urn, they have the potential of destruction of our world. Now, when I heard this illustration, I'm thinking there are some existing technologies that may already be catastrophic to our world, and it's just a matter of time. For instance, I'm sure you thought of this one. This comes immediately to mind, doesn't it? Global atomic destruction. It could happen very rapidly. It could be a cascade effect with many nations participating. And very soon, in a matter really of minutes, the whole world could be turned into a cinder. And according to the doomsday clock, we're only 100 seconds away on that clock from this happening out of the potential of 12 hours. That's very uncomfortable. But that's not the only technological threat that we're facing. It just is the most obvious one. There's really a lot more, and it's because of our vulnerable world, friends. In our vulnerable world, we are over-dependent on the system. You know, there was a time when every family had a family farm, and they were able to take care of themselves for the most part. That is a thing of the past for almost everybody. We are totally dependent on the system. We probably don't even know everything we're dependent on. Just in time, the just-in-time supply chain. You don't really think about that. You think you can just go to the supermarket and get what you want whenever you want. But the reason it works that way is because everything is planned to be shipped just in time. As long as the system's working, it's great. But what happens if the system goes down? What if it goes down for an extended period even? Then what are you going to eat? Once people can't eat, the world gets very ugly. So something as simple as the supply chain can be a big problem. We've had some disruptions lately in the supply chain, and thankfully it hasn't been with the staples we need to survive, but it has been enough of a reminder to us for us to realize that things like medical supplies and even the humble toilet paper is something we rely upon, but if the supply chain breaks down, you don't have it. Imagine if it's everything in the store. Electronic money. How much cash do you have in your pocket right now? Let's say there was a global disruption of electronic money. How long would it take before you literally could not survive? What about if you need a crisis response? Because let's face it, if you don't have what you need to survive and you're in a crisis, you need somebody to help you. What about those people in Louisiana, in Hurricane Katrina, that were trapped in the big stadium, thousands of them? Can you imagine that? What if that happened to a whole country, to the whole world? We are so dependent on the system. And of course, if you have a massive breakdown in the system and society reacts to that harshly, you could have a cascading effect of violence throughout the world that could literally destroy civilization. So system failure is a huge thing. Well, what could cause that? How about a global internet crash? Any system is literally impossible to rule out every conceivable threat. The nature of catastrophe is exactly that. You don't see it coming. I liked, well, I didn't like it, but I thought this was interesting, that it has been studied that the average American relies on the successful operation of more than 250 computers every day. Every day. So just conducting your life, you are subject to 250 computers every day. Considering how I feel about my own computer, I'm not pleased with that. And of course, the majority of that is internet connections. This is our world today. If the internet crashes, it literally could lead to a catastrophic failure, not just of the internet, but of civilization. A stock market collapse can have major impact. It can be much worse than what we experienced in 2008. Much worse. It may get much worse. A satellite cascade. I'm thinking this is not something we think a lot about. But of course, our entire system today depends on satellites. Communications, electronic communications are absolutely vital to the survival and the everyday operation of our system. If you take the satellites out of the picture, then everything crashes and goes down. And this is something that can happen. The Union of Concerned Scientists, isn't that an interesting name, Union of Concerned Scientists? They would know what to be concerned about, I'm thinking. And they think we should be concerned about this. They say there are over 1,100 active satellites in orbit, with around 60% of them used for communications. And then an additional 2,500 inactive satellites circling the Earth too. So the possibility of this cascade getting started is very real. However, we're going to add to that because Elon Musk wants to put tens of thousands of satellites blanketing the Earth. And Jeff Bezos, he wants to put a whole bunch of them up there too. And a number of other billionaires also are planning this. So the number of satellites that are in orbit right now is going to be totally dwarfed by the number they have in mind. And one expert says the worst case is this: you launch all your satellites, you go bankrupt, and they all stay there. Then you have thousands of new satellites without a plan of getting them out of there, and you would have a Kessler type of syndrome. In other words, a cascade where they start bumping into each other and then, like dominoes, just taking them all out. That could happen. Power grid blackout. Well, we have these from time to time in different places, and they're never fun. People do die sometimes because of blackouts, because they don't have enough heat, or where they are is too hot and they don't have any cooling. A series of blackouts in India impacted 700 million people, 10% of the world. If you had a total blackout, that's a technocalypse. Oil and gas disruptions. The world is dependent on oil and gas. What we've got here is a disruption from COVID-19. You've got all of these tankers just anchored off the coast because there's such a glut of oil, there's nowhere to put it. Imagine the opposite scenario. You know, things can change in ways that we never could have imagined. This picture is one of those things. You know, I lived through the shortage of gas in the 70s. We had long lines waiting at the gas tank to get gas, and we were paying way too much for it. And when you've lived in that world, and then you look at this picture, you think, whoa, things can really change. They can change really fast. They have changed really fast, haven't they? I always thought this was a very scary possibility, a water supply attack. This seems to be a favorite of TV shows and movies as well, because we're so vulnerable regarding water. We absolutely have to have it in order to live. Do you have a well? You might have a well where you live. Most of us don't now. We depend on that water company to pump that water to us all the time. What happens when that stops? What if there's a coordinated attack deliberately taking out the entire infrastructure? Well, that sounds pretty ridiculous if you had to send people all over the place to do it. But in the computer age, that's a whole different story. If you can get a computer virus into all these different systems, you totally can take down the entire system. And don't think it can't happen. Don't think it can't happen. There was an attack against Yahoo, and the attackers literally got a hold of half of this country's data of the people in the country. This is a huge problem. And let me say this too. We have quantum computing coming. Quantum computing works in an entirely different way. The encryption that we're all depending on to keep out the bad guys, quantum computing can break through that in seconds. As a matter of fact, it can go backwards into other things that you already have out there on the internet, things you've forgotten about that are under encryption, and obtain data and information that was never meant for anybody to have, but quantum computing opens all the doors. Big problem. And then, of course, we all hear about the rogue AI, right? Don't we have an interesting future coming up? Isn't technology such a great thing? At best, it's in the gray area, isn't it? At best. Yes, it does have some benefits, but the downside, just one time, could be a real killer. As a matter of fact, you know what? It is a real killer. Since 1970, we've lost 52% of the Earth's bird, mammal, fish, reptile, and amphibian population. Entire species are dying out at a rapid rate. What is the cause? Well, the people who are causing it don't want you to know what the cause is. And you know, they're the ones that fund all the studies and basically hold the reins of power. So they want to keep this in the gray area. Because if we found out about the chemicals that they're putting into the food and into our environment that ends up in the water, that ends up all through our environment, things like plastics, GMOs, electromagnetic radiation, how about that? Can you imagine when we add, like, I don't know, 60,000 satellites all beaming microwave energy towards the Earth? How much worse that will be? Here's just one indication of how dangerous electromagnetic radiation is. There was a study done. The scientific journal Human Reproduction published a shocking finding in 2017. The bottom line, sperm count has halved in Western civilization since the 1970s. Sperm count has dropped by over half. And it's getting worse because guys are doing what you see in the picture. Everybody's carrying around a cell phone. And it's literally cooking men's sperm. And many men are becoming infertile because of carrying the cell phone around, let alone holding it to the side of your head, friends. Electromagnetic energy. It is very helpful in many ways, but it is very harmful in many ways as well. And the amount of electromagnetic energy that's being beamed out at this point in time is only going to get so much more than it is right now. Can you say 5G? Can you say Starlink? If the animals have already died off by 50% in the world, if we're literally becoming infertile as human beings, what does that tell you about the future of the world in this situation? To me, we're already in a black ball situation. It's just a matter of time. Then we have designer bugs. This is the new favorite because it's during this last decade that the ability to do this has been perfected. As this article points out, new tools from the field of synthetic biology could endow scientists with the frightening ability to design and manufacture maximally dangerous pathogens, leapfrogging natural selection. leapfrogging nature, is how I would put it. And it also says, no obvious physical or biological constraints preclude the construction of such potent biological weapons. According to biosecurity expert Piers Millett, if you're deliberately trying to create a pathogen that is deadly, spreads easily, and that we don't have appropriate public health measures to mitigate, then that thing you create is amongst the most dangerous things on the planet. I guess I should let you read it too. That's really scary, because you know what that's saying to me? A year ago, we were warned. A year later, it happened. Humanity has drawn the black ball from the urn. At this point, we're all very fortunate, actually, because the bioweapon that was released into the world, that brought the world to a halt, isn't killing very many people in comparison to what could be happening. Now, I don't mean to minimize the deaths, because they're horrible. But the truth is, to me, it looks more like a shot across the bow than the main event. Because it would be possible. The people who did this could do it. It would be possible to make a synthetic virus that was far more deadly, that would kill virtually everybody. That could happen. We should be very concerned about this, because this is something real. This is happening in our world right now. I can understand why they keep trying to put a lid on this, to keep us from knowing that this is a synthetic virus. But if you dig, the information's out there. I have presented the information too. And there's no doubt that this was sliced and diced and put together for a specific purpose. This is the black ball, dealing with genetics, rearranging the building blocks of life. Why couldn't that destroy the world? And here is sort of a big category. The black ball could be the catastrophic technology we don't know about yet. You see, there could be other things that we don't know. And when they're discovered, they could be immediately catastrophic. Because that's where we're at, friends. That's where we've come to in the 21st century. Nobody is controlling these people. Nobody is stopping these people. They're doing whatever they think they can make a buck on. This is a very dangerous situation. This is a vulnerable world. And actually, this has been known for decades, that the world is a vulnerable world and it's headed for trouble. I have a little video I want to share with you from 1972.
It's not some science fantasy effect from 2001. This electronic display, emanating from Australia's largest computer, is a picture of the condition, past, present and future of planet Earth. The program was originally devised by a scientist working from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Jay Forrester. It was developed under the auspices of the Club of Rome by an MIT research team to present a complex model of the world and what we humans are doing to it. The program, called World 1, doesn't pretend to be a precise forecast. What it does for the first time in man's history on the planet is to look at the world as one system. It shows that Earth cannot sustain present population and industrial growth for much more than a few decades. It shows that simply cleaning up our car exhausts and making some small effort to limit our families simply isn't enough. It's like an electronic guided tour of our global behaviour since 1900 and where that behaviour will lead us. Well, this is the printed version of what we've just seen on the television screen. And what looks at first to be just a maze of computer characteristics is really a system of very simple graphs which project what's going to happen to the planet over the next 150 years if we don't do something drastic to stop it. Down the left-hand side of the graph is the date, 1900, 1940, 1980, 2020, right down to 2060. Now, each of these lines of letters represents a curve showing some aspect of the condition of the planet. The further out this way they go, the greater that figure is, the further this way, the less. For example, P represents population. So here it is at 1900, and then it comes up to 1940, it starts to take off. Here we are at 1980, up to the turn of the century, and then it starts to peter off. Let's now have a look at this next curve, the Q curve, which is the quality of life. And this is represented by, for example, the amount of space people have, the amount of money they have to spend, the amount of food they have to eat. Now, it increases rapidly up to 1940, but from 1940 on, the quality of life diminishes. And here we are about the turn of the century, and we come up to the year 2020, and it's really come right back. More people, of course, means that you start to chew up your supply of natural resources. And this is this curve here, the N curve. And it shows that slowly but steadily, the pool of natural wealth in the world, natural resources, minerals, oil, and so on, is slowly but steadily diminishing. So this is the situation. As population increases, the quality of life decreases, and the supply of natural resources decreases. But have a look at this curve here. This is called the Z curve, and it represents pollution. Now, predictably enough, as the population increases up to 1980, pollution increases. There's more rubbish. But from 1980 to the year 2020, pollution really takes off. This is assuming, of course, that we don't do anything about it. So the year 2020, the condition of the planet starts to become highly critical. And if we don't do anything about it, this is what's going to happen. The quality of life is going to go right back to practically zero. Pollution is going to become so serious, right out here, that it will start to kill people. So the population will diminish. Right back here, less than it was in the year 1900. And at this stage, around about the year 2040, 2050, civilized life as we know it on this planet will cease to exist.
Call it Apocalypse 2040. In the early 1970s, a computer program called World One predicted that civilization would likely collapse by 2040. Researchers at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, had programmed it to consider a model of sustainability for the world. As you have just seen, the bad news for us is that the model seems to be spot on so far.
That was interesting, wasn't it? You know, it has tracked pretty close to that, don't you think? Particularly if you've been here through those, the closing part of the 20th century. You've seen that all happen very much like that. I'd like to mention something about that too. The Club of Rome sponsored that. The Club of Rome is a group of the elite. And they have had a plan for a long time. There's actually more on this video, but I didn't have time to share it all, where some of the people from the Club of Rome are interviewed, and they're saying what their plan is. And amazingly, it's very, very similar to what Nick Bostrom is saying now. They've had the same plan all along. And it makes me wonder, as I look at that computer model if that's actually tracking data or if it's tracking the plan of the Club of Rome and the rest of the elite. Just kind of an interesting question. Well, I'm a Bible teacher, and I've taught a lot about the passage of time and things that happen from the standpoint of Bible prophecy. And what I've seen is that Bible prophecy has agreed with essentially the main things that we saw in that video as they have unfolded. And that video kind of shows us you get to 2020 and everything starts going to pieces. Did you notice that? Did you notice that happened? Did you notice the world kind of got a little shove right at the beginning of 2020? Connect the dots. The scriptures very much agree with this picture and show us to have entered into a very critical period. And the good thing is the scriptures offer a real solution, and it doesn't involve world tyranny. So we're going to get into that a little bit later. But it's interesting that the pattern that was set forth, sponsored by the Club of Rome, from this first computer to do this, has tracked so closely with what has actually happened and what the Bible has predicted for this generation. So we have every reason to believe, since everything else the Bible has predicted has come true, that the rest of it will happen too. So I just want to invite anyone who is with us right now. Soon we're going to put out a new edit of this Ages of the World series that I did. And particularly, you want to look at the last age of the world, which deals with these very issues. We also have a lot of other prophetic material and seminars available at the site, and we invite you to come and see them. So that's pretty much the picture of what has happened. So I guess what I want to say is the first part of the illustration, I think, is true, that we have brought a lot of black balls, or I would say gray balls out that could be good or bad. But I think it's arguable that we already have taken some black balls out of the urn too and set us on a course towards destruction. So I believe that part of the hypothesis is provable. I think it's correct and that it's provable. But then this brings us to this part of the this part of the proposition, that the solution is the solution is totalitarianism. Shocking. The solution is totalitarianism. This is amazing. There are 5 reasons that I'm going to share that totalitarianism won't work. Now, I probably could come up with a lot more than 5, but once I got to 5, I figured, hey, 5 stars, I'm done. Here's the number 1 reason. Who will watch the watchers? What stops the techie geeks who are running the tech from exploiting it to hack the black tech themselves? See, this is a big thing, isn't it? This has always been the problem. Remember Snowden, who worked basically able to spy on everybody's stuff? He's an employee there, can spy on anything. No controls for those guys. And fortunately, he blew the whistle on that. But that's the way those systems have to work. There have to be people who have access to the system, to all that information and how it all works. So those people are bound to find out about that black technology. All you need is just one of them to think, well, I could make that work, and then I could be the greatest person in the world. So watching all the people who aren't doing the watching isn't really going to help much. Watching the caretakers, that's a better proposition, and that never happens. Then, of course, we have the petty officials and enforcers of the system. We've had a lot of experience with them lately, haven't we? You give people a little more power than they usually have, and you're bound to have some of those people that go crazy with it. You know what I mean. That is happening. It doesn't take too long before those kind of people can make the cure worse than the disease. And of course, they're all going to skate too. So, you know what? It's really the worst people in the world that tend to gravitate towards those positions. Those are the people most likely to use the black tech against the world. And what about blackball coercion? What stops our all-wise overlords from using the blackball scenario, even when it isn't real, to dominate people and control their lives? Nothing. And number 5, which happens to be my favorite, elites and governments always get a pass, yet they are far more dangerous than the common man. Here's what I'm talking about. Here's a man who made this his life study, studying death by government. And he published this book, which has great detail, well studied out. And in the 20th century, he found that governments murdered about 169 million people. Think about that. I'm not talking about wars here. I'm talking about intentional killing by a government of unarmed people. Governments are very dangerous. And statistically, they're more dangerous than anybody. The rulers are more dangerous than the people by a wide margin. And even if you factor in people like terrorists and criminals, the government is still way beyond them in terms of being dangerous. Now, there is a formula that can actually be applied to this. The best predictor of democide, that's the name given to governments killing their own people, the best predictor of democide lethality is total power squared. In other words, the amount of total power that government has over the people. So simply put, the more power the government has over the individual, the more murders of citizens occur. So in other words, a totalitarian entity that is all-seeing and all-powerful over the lives of people is itself the black ball. Off the charts. Totally off the charts. And who's controlling that? When I considered all of this, I thought, surely Nick Bostrom knows these reasons, and others with him eliminate totalitarianism as a solution. It's a preposterous solution. And You know, most of us are not college professors, but we can figure this out, that this is no solution. So I'm wondering, why put forth a solution that is obviously wrong? Well, I looked for an answer on the Future of Humanity Institute website, and I found that it was pleased to announce a contribution of up to £13.3 million from the Open Philanthropy Project. This was the largest donation in their history. So what is this? What is this Open Philanthropy Project? I know I never got a donation from them. Don't expect one either. This is a foundation, a charity. You know, these billionaires all love to set up their charities. And this is one set up by Dustin Aaron Moskovitz, and he is the co-founder of Facebook. And what his foundation does is it identifies giving opportunities and makes grants. And of course, they get money from other billionaires too, that they can loan, that they can give out. But Open Philanthropy is tasked with giving away the bulk of Moscovitz's multi-billion-dollar wealth. Now, they all say this, but they never use up all their money, and they get richer every year. But anyway, they're funding this. These are the people that are funding Nick Bostrom's organization at Oxford. So I'm wondering about this. Would the co-founder of Facebook and all his elite billionaire friends like a solution giving them the right to spy on every person every minute of every day? Facebook would never want to do that, right? Oh yeah, and also to dominate the entire planet? Would they want to do that? Would the globalist elite pay money for a new excuse to surveil and dominate every person? Do you think that would be worth a contribution to Oxford? Could this be just one more example of how the elites get academics and scientists to produce results favorable to their interests? You know, I used to be very impressed with various studies that would come out. I remember years ago, a study came out showing that Americans needed to eat according to the food pyramid. And you know, on the widest, fattest part, making up more than half of the food pyramid, is all kinds of sugar and carbohydrates. Studies proved it, the most healthy thing. And then at the top, you get a little bit where you got some vegetables, and then at the very top, just a little bit where you've got some protein and fats. You know what I learned later? All those studies, they were all sponsored by the food industry. And they made big money with the food pyramid. And meanwhile, people died of heart attacks, obesity, diabetes, and the list goes on. Those studies, let me tell you something. Scientists can be whores too. And often they are. If you live long enough, you start to understand how the world works. And it isn't pretty, but it's how it works. But of course, our friend Nick would be above that, wouldn't he? So he actually thinks totalitarianism is the solution. You decide. So why did they fund this? Why did the elite fund this at Oxford, the most prestigious institution on the planet, arguably? Why did they fund it? They need the support of this theory. And now that they have it, this vulnerable world hypothesis, it is energizing the elite. Because you know why? It gives these morally degenerate people who are totally selfish, but don't want to be seen by the world as being selfish, a moral justification to do literally anything to force humanity under a yoke of global tyranny powered by unprecedented technology. You see, now they can claim they're doing it for you. It's all for your safety, friends. Have you ever heard that before? I'm telling you, now that this is out and they're pushing this, you're going to be hearing about this a lot more. And we're in a new era. We've come to a new level. The globalist elites are now making covert war on all ordinary people of this world to bring everyone under a global totalitarian technocracy. And most of us do nothing to defend ourselves. We don't even believe it. Most of us don't even believe it. And I think even now, where most everybody that's hearing this, you may have lost your job. You may have lost your business. You have been isolated away by yourself. Your life has been totally affected and changed by something that you had no control over. And yet you still don't know you're at war. This is a bioweapon, friends. You may not like it, but somebody is making war on you. Wake up and smell the coffee. Life is not going to go on like it always did. I know you want things to get back to the way they were. Well, they never are going to. Never. Oh, it might change back a little bit just to throw you off a little bit, but the next thing is coming. Trust me. These people are absolutely determined to bring the world under totalitarianism and to do it soon. And they have means. They hold the keys to all the doors. They have all the levers of power. They have money, lots of money, control over the money. They have the technology. This is not a movie. This is real life. It's on, 100%. Now the happy stuff. There is a solution. I'm so happy about this. There is a solution. There is a vulnerable world solution. And before I tell it to you, I want to tell you this. There's not a thing in the world you can do to make it happen. I'm going to tell you what I'm not going to say. I'm not going to tell you to contact your senator and congressman. You know why? They're on the take too, probably. And if not, they're powerless over this. And you're powerless over this. There will be opposition. There will be pushback against all of these would-be dictators. This is going to happen. Unfortunately, there will be gunfire and worse. Don't get connected with that because it's a lost cause. You know America? America's over. The America you knew, or thought you knew, or that you believed in, that's over now. It's just a matter of time. You can't bring it back because its time is over. I don't like telling you that. Somebody has to tell you. And if you happen to be a spiritual person, don't take my word for it. Talk to your Father in heaven and say, is this true? Is it really true that America's over? And have the courage to listen. Because you need to catch up with what's going on if you're going to get through this. You got to get your head out of the sand if you're going to get through this. You're going to have to look at the world as it really is. You're going to have to see what's really going on if you're going to get through this. Our Father in heaven has the solution. We just need to work along with him. Peaceful. We're called to peace. Well, here's a good place to start for a solution. Stop stealing from the Creator's urn without his permission. What makes these people think that they have a right to cross barriers that the Creator deliberately set up to break and enter into his areas to mess with his stuff? Cut it out. Stop it. And I know what they'll say. Well, there really is no God. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt and have done abominable iniquity. The things we're talking about are abominable iniquity. And the excuse, well, if we don't do it, somebody else will, doesn't work. There is somebody watching you. He who created the world is watching you. You are accountable whether you want to accept it or not accept it. It's still true. It's his world, not yours. Hands off. Playing God has brought us to the edge of destruction. Right now. And now you come up with a solution to push that even further, just as far as you can push it. Which is to say, the fools will not turn back to God and repent. So the solution is not convincing these people to change their mind and be good people. They already made their choice. They wouldn't be who they are unless they'd already sold out to Satan, would they? So stop worrying about them. They're the enemies of God. They're the enemies of humanity. If some of them repent, all the better, but don't expect it. Here's the psalm that seems to be talking exactly about what's going on. Psalm chapter 2, a prophetic psalm. It starts out, why do the nations rage and the peoples plot a vain thing? Taking over, total control of the world, right down to every movement of every person. Taking the place of God is a vain thing. The kings of the earth take a stand, and the rulers take counsel together against Yahweh and against his Messiah. You see, these things they're doing, they are taking a position against the Creator and his Messiah, whom he has set forth to rule. And what do they say? Let's break their bonds apart and cast their cords from us. They can't control us. God can't control me. We're taking over now. That's what they're saying. That's what they want to do. That's what their one world government is about. Taking total control over those things that belong to God. Wresting that right out of his hand. He who sits in the heavens will laugh. Who do they think they are? Who do they think they are? They think they're pretty hot because they can build a cell phone. The Creator built the universe. He will speak to them in anger. Yet I have set my king in my holy hill of Zion. Long ago, he determined who would rule this world. The only person who's worthy of that position, the only person who could ever do that and remain righteous, good, loving, kind, his son, Yeshua, who gave his life for us, who proved himself. He speaks here. He says, I, the Messiah, will tell of the decree. Yahweh said, ask of me, I'll give the nations for your inheritance. You shall break them with a rod of iron. You shall dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. These people are forcing a confrontation. And they're going to get it. And here's the outcome. Messiah. He's going to break them in pieces. They're going to find out they're not the masters of the universe that they think they are. So the psalm tells them, therefore be wise, you kings. Give sincere homage to the Son, lest he be angry and you perish on the way, for his wrath will soon be kindled. Yes, some of them could humble themselves before him. Let's pray that happens. And it says, blessed are those who take refuge in him. Now that's talking about the Messiah. The Messiah is the solution, friends. We know it. He is the solution. He didn't create us in freedom so these people could take over our lives and totally dominate our every move. He's not down with that. Because if we're giving them our entire lives, we're not giving him the service he deserves. So he's not going to be happy with this, and anybody that knows and loves him isn't going to be happy with this either. And this is going to come to a confrontation. The book of Revelation talks about this. Revelation 11, 7 through 18. Revelation gives us a look into the future of the end of these days, speaking this prophetic prayer. We give you thanks, Lord Elohim, the Almighty, the one who is and who was, because you've taken your great power and reigned. The nations were angry, and your wrath came, as did the time for the dead to be judged, and to give your bondservants, the prophets, their reward, as well as the holy ones, and those who fear your name, to the small and the great, and to destroy those who destroy the earth. That's the solution. Get rid of the people that are causing the problem. That's not our job. That's his job. And he says when he comes, he's going to do that. He's going to destroy those who are destroying the earth. And it is going to happen. Unfortunately, it's the only solution that will work. Because as long as people like this, who want to totally dominate everybody else, who want to rip off everybody, who want to take over all of the resources of the world, who want to dominate all the people, as long as those people are in the world, it can't be better. You know what? We could have a technological society right now, it would be possible, that didn't have these problems. Could totally happen. Think about how our world is organized. Like, for instance, we talked about the vulnerable world, right? Do you think it's by accident that we have been totally separated from all means of support of ourselves? Do you think that's an accident, that it happened that way? Couldn't we just as easily have technology so that each of us could have our own land, our own home, with our own energy? Even with existing technology, like, for instance, solar panels to provide our energy, or other ways. Is there any reason we couldn't do that? Is there any reason that families and extended families couldn't be raising their own food in their own community, trade for things? That's how it used to be for a very long time. There's no reason that couldn't be done with a technological society. Do you need a car? You know, it's proven that hydrogen cars are totally possible. You could actually use water as fuel. You wouldn't be dependent on Exxon, big oil, at all. Everything is set up in such a way that we're all dependent on the elite of this world, and we are all supporting them. And they are draining everything away from us. It's all set up that way. And it's all set up to make us dependent on them, because that way we have no means to fight back. You know, in the Civil War, the reason there could be a civil war is because people had their own means. Families had their own means. The Revolutionary War that made America a country, same thing. People had independence. In fact, that's why they made the Declaration of Independence. They were trying to keep the independence they had. We don't have independence anymore. We ought to change the name of that document, because we don't have independence anymore. It's gone. We've already lost most of our freedom. It's been taken from us. It's not necessarily government that took it. Think about it. It's the big corporations that took it. It's the big money and the banking interests that took it. And they did it very deliberately. They did it on purpose, and they did it with a plan. It didn't have to be that way at all. If they had had the interests of humanity at heart, it wouldn't be that way. No matter how much they act as if they actually cared about humanity. If you care that much, give up some of your billions to help people. Like all of it. They don't do that. They set up a foundation, and somehow they end up richer than they were when they started. This is what they do. It's not going to change. Not as long as it's like this. Some people have thought socialism or communism was the way to go. Then we'd all be equal, right? Except some are more equal than others in that system. These people that we're talking about always gravitate to the top. Trust me. They are actually empowered by Satan to get into those positions in order to rule the world the way he wants it done. That's what's going on. So there's no system that we can devise that's going to change that. Righteous people, that's what's needed. Righteous people ruling the world. There's no system for that. There's no system that can accomplish that. Only the Messiah can accomplish that. This is not a pie-in-the-sky dream. So much in the Bible that has been foretold and prophesied has occurred, much of it during our generation. And it is unfolding. Messiah has a plan too, and he is unfolding it. And that is the solution. So here we are. We have a time of crisis. We're living in a time of crisis. And it's going to intensify. There's a war going on. And in the book of Revelation, it shows us that. Global totalitarianism. That's what we're looking at. You know, there's never been totalitarianism like this. They've wanted to do it, but they haven't been able to do it. Just imagine what they're proposing. Being able to use technology to track every person's movements in real time all the time. And whatever they don't like, to be able to instantly censor. And of course, the very worst possibility is if Elon Musk's vision goes along with this, and we have our brains actually wired into the system. Imagine that. What they're envisioning, there's nothing like this. There's never been anything like this. Yeshua talked about it in Matthew 24. He says, "For then there will be great oppression." Isn't that a good name for this? Great oppression, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, nor ever will be again. Could you describe this any better than that? Unless those days had been shortened, no flesh would have been saved. But for the sake of the chosen ones, those days will be shortened. Isn't that exactly what we've been talking about? Facing the possibility of the end of all life on earth. And we're there. And we're reassured. For the sake of the chosen ones, those days will be shortened. Messiah will step in. He'll put an end to that. He is the solution. He also said in Luke chapter 21, so be careful, that day will come on you suddenly, for it will come like a snare on all those who dwell on the surface of the earth. Therefore, be watchful all the time, praying that you may be counted worthy to escape all these things that will happen and to stand before the Son of Man. We have a time that we've entered into that is going to get progressively closer to that totalitarianism until it actually totally takes over. That is going to be increasingly difficult. That's what's going to happen. And it will involve oppression. It will involve persecution of those who have chosen to stand with the rightful creator of the world rather than with these usurpers. For us to be counted worthy to escape means there will be a place of escape. There is a plan. It's outlined in Scripture, and somehow most churches don't know anything about it. They've never heard of it. They don't understand it. They don't get it at all. Instead, they've put their trust, many of them, into a pre-tribulation rapture. They got all their marbles in that. And that's all based, unfortunately, on an error. That's not the answer. It's not the answer. We must escape out of all the nations where the global totalitarian regime will rule before it comes to total power. You see, if you're still in the situation you're in right now, where you are just totally dependent on the system, wherever you live in the world, how are you possibly going to resist this global totalitarianism? Well, I'm sure you have to give me that. But you're probably thinking, yes, but we're talking about the whole world, so how can you escape that? Well, there is a plan for that. There is a place, in fact, that some 4,000 years ago, the Creator promised us to be our safe place in this world. If only we would side with Him. If only we would honor Him. There is a plan. There is a place. Pray that you will be counted worthy of being part of that. The vulnerable world solution. We've got so much more. Hours. And you should invest them. We're not doing ourselves a favor by giving you all this information. It's just right there for you. Hours of free information to help you through this time. And I just want to invite anyone who's just learning about this to take the time to come and get your spirit fed and find out what there is in store to help you to get through this time. Thank you for listening. Let's pray together. Our Father, I just want to thank you so much tonight for your word and the wisdom that you've put in there to help us understand and see the deceptions that are around us in this world. And I just pray, Father, for our viewers, whether they're with us for the first time or our old friends. Father, open all of our eyes to see the reality of where our world is at right now and where it's going and why it's going there. There is a plan, a very sinister plan. You foresaw it in your word, and it's being played out. And Father, we need to understand so that we can take a stand with you. So Father, I just want to pray for folks to turn their hearts towards you. I pray right now that they will do business with you, that they will come to you in prayer, that they will see the gravity of the situation this world is in right now and where it is headed, and that they will do personal business with you and pray that they will be counted worthy of escaping. Father, thank you for the privilege of being able to share this message with folks. And Father, I just pray for them. I pray for the righteous. I pray for those who are inclined towards righteousness. I pray for those who are appalled by the idea of total and complete dictatorship of this world. I want to pray for those who honor your name, Father, and who you are. Show us the way, Father. Lead the way. Bring us home. We pray in the name of our Messiah, the rightful ruler of this world, Yeshua. Amen. Now here's Abigail.
We want to thank you all for joining us tonight, and we want to invite you all to join us again next week for our next meeting. Shabbat Shalom.